In this episode of the podcast, we're talking to Ra Koh. Now, Ra is a photographer. She's an educator. She's an author of 6 different books, her latest one being 4 Minutes to Hear God's Voice. She's also a traveler. Her, along with Brian, her husband, and her family have traveled the world, and they actually filmed a television show for Disney. We're going to talk about all of her incredible experiences, and we're going to start with a deeply vulnerable subject as Ra talks about some of the hard experiences that brought her into the position that she's in today, where she has a voice to speak to those that have gone through traumatic events. Let's dive in. This is the TSS Podcast. It's a place for authentic conversations to uncover the stupid, simple truths that help us succeed in business, create better relationships, and lead more fulfilling lives. Welcome to Think Stupid Simple. What we don't do on every single podcast is start with 40 minutes of tech support. But what we do on every single podcast is light the candle to start our conversation. But we've actually been talking for 40 minutes about how to fix the freaking sound and the echoes.
I'm like so exhausted right now from 40 minutes of trying to fix an echo.
Yeah, we were like 10 minutes into it.
I need to light my own candle.
Do you want a minute to get a drink? Do you need a drink? Like sit down.
I'm going to light my own candle over here.
Yes, get your candles lit, girl. We're 10 minutes into the thing, and Mira's like, I'm gonna get the big guns. I want to bring Brian in here, her husband, and 30 minutes later, we got the issue fixed. We also swapped a cable on our side. Poor Mike, he's like, Anthony's out today, and Mike steps in just for this one episode, and Mira's like, so this is all Mike's fault.
I don't know if I'd have Mike back again. I think that's what we can conclude.
He's never coming back again. He's like, I'm done with these guys.
Wow, rude.
Look at this. Do you guys see this? Ra Koh.
Yay!
Mira, you have well first, I actually wanted to ask you a separate question that I don't know that I've ever asked you before. But what is the origin of your name? Is that your first and last name, or is it like, tell me about this.
Yes. Okay. Yes. My dad's Korean. And so Koreans often put their first and middle name together. Uh-huh. And so me is actually my first name and Ra is my middle name. And so Mira. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And yeah. And so that's, and Mira means, it's like, this is what my dad at least said, or what my Korean side of my family said, is
so you're
that
saying he could be lying to you. This is at least what he told me.
I feel like you have to take everything and divide it by 4. But like what my dad said is that it's like a metaphor for silk, which is their strongest but softest fabric. And so it's kind of cool, right?
That is kind of cool. That's very cool.
Yeah. And then Koh is actually my Korean grandmother's
family name,
maiden name. Yeah. And so my first book that came out 20 years ago, that was, based on my story of coming through having been date raped. And I was still having a lot of issues with that person, stalking and like trying, to put control and fear in my life. And so I decided to like use that last name. And then I don't know, 10 years later, when we started photography, we just thought, well, let's just keep it and keep going with that. So Brian's last name is not Koh. He's not Korean. He's not.
Really? That is a shocker.
I know.
Because,
the Scandinavian characteristics.
If he were Korean, I would imagine we would have solved that issue a little bit quicker.
Exactly. That's actually exactly what I was thinking. It is.
I mean, Korea has their stuff together when it comes to like internet.
Yes.
You know this, right? Like,
No, when it comes to just about everything, we do.
let's just take it easy for a second. Let's focus on the internet. Korea's got it together when it comes to the internet. No, seriously though, there's like the biggest internet gaming and like all the legends of internet. You know, e-gaming?
Like not really, but I'm sure like my kids do.
Okay. So e-gaming is like a big deal. And the funny thing is
Okay.
that they actually call it like esports. And I'm
Okay.
sitting here going like, I don't know if you can put those two things in the same category, but they kind of are. And it's legit because you got, tens of thousands of people that will come to these events to watch people play video games. And some of the best gamers are out of Korea.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, so it's like legit, but they treat it like sports where like if you imagine watching a football game, like you have the entrance of like the team and all this kind of stuff. But it's the same pomp and circumstance, but then all these like kind of
They go and sit down at a
little guys
video
and
game.
girls come out and go sit down and like play a video game, and you're like, and they announce with like the same excitement too. They're like, "Oh my gosh, did you see where he just dropped that storm? That was right." And you're like, this is highly unusual for me, but
That's funny. That's
but it's
funny.
legit. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they have everything else, too, but they have that arena.
Yeah. Yeah. Korean. Yeah. We could have a whole 2-hour conversation about Koreans. I don't know if we want to do that though today.
I wasn't in planning on it, but let me say, Mira, that your smile and laugh is quite infectious. But you dropped a
Thanks,
bomb
Brian.
earlier. I want to go back to. Sorry, I didn't even
Sure.
leave room for you to say thanks. Just go, your smile's great, but you dropped a bomb. Um, wait, so this is your sixth book, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and
This is my
you
sixth
said that
book.
your first one was coming out of a story of you were date raped?
Yes. Yeah, it was really the first book is called Beauty Restored, and it was really just all around my story of piecing my life back together after not just, the date rape is enough, but like not just that, but like all the fallout from it, I guess. Because I really had a difficult relationship with my dad growing up. A lot of cultural like confusion and just a lot of like trauma in his life that hadn't been worked through and was then like taken out on me. And so when I went to college for the first time, I was, just in a really broken place. I didn't have any sense of self-esteem or self-worth. And shortly, like within the first few weeks, I met this older student who was charismatic. It was a Christian university. He was studying to be a youth pastor, and he was like, to my surprise, interested in me and kind of like locked onto me and like wanting to become a friend. And then eventually, like, and then months to follow, like wanting to date. And I was just so broken and hungry for love that it was just like it was amazing to have that kind of like attention that I'd
Sure.
never really had from my dad. So, so to kind of paraphrase, like you can read the book, but it's really about God piecing my life back together because I went to court and I lost. He was let back into the campus. I was probably the fourth or fifth person he had done that to. And I was stalked then for 9 months and ended up becoming suicidal and then my mom flew me to a psychiatric ward in California. I was in Seattle at the time and I was locked there for a month. And so it's really
That's
great when
wild.
you say I have a great smile and laugh because it really is, I feel like, a testament to the healing that's happened coming from such a shattered place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
Mhm.
I almost feel like not only that side of it in the healing and coming to a place of being healthy where you're at now, but I also feel like it's the people that come back from those depths. I can't empathize with what you've gone through. That's a horrendous story. But the people that can best kind of understand and have been through the depths of those sorrows are generally the ones that when they recover, they truly see the joy. Like they see the flip side and they focus on the joy and everything. Like you can almost see it in their countenance and the way that they smile. So it's almost not
Yay.
surprising that you
Mhm.
tell me that who you are today came from this, deeply tragic event. Going back to that, I don't want to. I
Yeah.
want to be very sensitive to the subject and everything.
Sure.
When you were on this date, are you comfortable telling us, like, at what point did this take a really bad turn? Because I
Yeah.
have two
Yeah.
daughters, and this stuff terrifies me.
Mhm. Well, you know what's so interesting is that it was really like special. My daughter right now is the age that I was when all this happened. She's
Oh
19,
wow,
and she read my book for the first time this last month, and
wow,
it was just really powerful. Pi, like in your book, that you're um that you've done on relationships. I loved one of the things that I read in the very beginning, that you were dedicating this book to your kids, and really you were writing it for them more than anything. And I thought about that because I was like, gosh, I would never imagine so many years later, 30 years later, really almost, that my own daughter would read it and we would have a very candid conversation on how did mom get to this place, and what are all the moving pieces of like why I didn't recognize the toxicity of what I was in. And so it was just like, it's just interesting to have, because everything I think we're doing in our life as far as trying to better ourselves is to like lift the ceiling for us so that can be the ground our kids stand on, right?
yeah,
And so as far as like when did it take a bad turn, it was just so subtle and slow. Like it started with the extreme of him really loving everything about me, applauding everything about me, to like one day I remember we were going to go out on a date and I came down. I was, living in the dorm. It was my first year of school. So I came downstairs to meet him and he looked at me and he was like, "Why would you ever wear that? Why would you
oh, that's
ever
weird.
think that that would be acceptable?" And it was like, it wasn't anything racy, but it was just, I think it was like a first test in his part to see like where my like own confidence and self-worth was. Because what I did is I internalized that and I was like, "Oh, yeah, you're right. I don't know." And I went up and changed.
Oh wow,
And then it became things like, "I heard so and so talking about you. And I know you think that you guys are friends, but I wouldn't trust them because of like what I heard." And that started happening with multiple friendships. And so all of a sudden I started isolating more and more until we're like, he was the only person that I felt like was trustworthy as a friend. Did I take the time to go and talk to those people about it? No, because I didn't have any like healthy tools in my life of how talk to someone about conflict, or reach out to them and see if there's a misunderstanding. I just completely like gravitated to him. I remember us driving in the car, and out of nowhere he would grab my thigh and he would squeeze it really hard and talk to me like, why, like still smiling. And that was, I
that's
think, a
so
test
crazy.
on his part too, of like, am I going to tell him I'm uncomfortable and like ask him to stop, or am I not? And I didn't. Like I didn't have a voice. I left home without a voice, and I didn't have a voice with him. And so at some point, like a few months into us dating, I knew I was miserable, even though I couldn't figure out why. And so I broke off us dating, our relationship, and he was really upset, and the whole God manipulation thing came into it, of like God told him we were supposed to be married, and I was going against all of that. But I just knew like something was off. So he was very persistent in just wanting to be friends, and I finally agreed to have dinner with him. And that night is when it happened. It was Valentine's night, almost 30 years ago. And instead of taking me back to the dorm after dinner, he took me to an abandoned parking lot in Seattle, and that's where he raped me. And even then, I really was so disconnected. I think I went into a place of shock for sure, like which is very common for rape victims. Um, in the next few months, I just wore like baggy clothes all the time. I didn't have any friends left anymore, and he was gone. And it wasn't until an adult leader on campus, like an RN type person, came up to me and she said that the dorm had just had this night on sexual like victimization and date rape awareness. And she said that this woman that came from the assault center had like 12 characteristics of a of someone who's been victimized or date raped. And she was like, I just couldn't stop thinking about you. Like, I feel like lately you are every single one of those characteristics. And that's when it hit me. It was like someone threw cold water on me. And I realized, oh my gosh, it's like I woke up from like a state of like disconnect that I'd been in, a disassociation that had gone on like too long. And so I told her what happened, and we called the police and we reported it. And you know, those kinds of crimes are really hard to like actually have evidence. But I did then go back to all the other women he had told me about that he had dated, and they'd all had the same thing happen. We all had bad relationships with our father. We all had like, it's like we were a type, and I had no idea that I was wearing a bullseye, and he knew how to identify me, but I wasn't aware that I had that bullseye on me. And so I asked those other women to go to court with me, but they were, you know, nervous about it for good reason. And I ended up going by myself, and it was just horrible. It was just, I had a woman judge ask me why I didn't just fight harder or get out of the car. He had his whole church there. There was like 40 people in the audience. And my dad told me he never wanted to see me again because I had brought shame to our family. So now I was living out of my car in Seattle parking lots and friends' couches. And, you know, you can kind of see like why I escalated down so fast.
What this guy did was emotional abuse leading up to physical abuse at its finest. I mean, there is no better example than how to do that to somebody. And the underlying situations that, this is the crazy thing. And when you tell me this story, like it's heart-wrenching because I can see it playing out. I can see judges and everybody else wondering, how the hell do you let this happen to you? And you don't let it happen to you. It's a series of things, from starting with childhood, where one of our core needs, it's right there. Like Maslow's hierarchy is still there. It's still in our lives. It's this,
Yes.
the third piece of the, you know, once we're safe from harm, once we have food on the table, the next thing that we're looking for, the next thing that we need is love and belonging. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have been in a family where you got a sense of love and belonging growing up, then you're not fortunate. You're literally one of the few. Do you know what I mean? Because the numbers, like if you just look at, I don't like necessarily looking at statistics a lot, but in the case of like just understanding this subject, if you look at the numbers, and let's just say, you know, divorce statistics vary from 40% to 80% depending on where you live and the time frame and all that. But let's just put a number on it, 50%, okay? That means that you've got a 50% chance of growing up in a broken home. You know, then let's look at other factors. How, of the 50% of people that stay together, how many of them are actually happy? How many of them are emotionally abusive? How many of them are, you know, let's just go with how many are actually happy. Of the 50% that stay together, what?
Yeah.
What do you think? 10%, 20%, 30%?
Like what percentage is actually healthy and functioning like in a probably 10%.
Okay. So that means that off the bat, we're not even talking about abusive parents or anything like that, but off the bat, you've got like a 80 to 90% shot of being born into a family that's either broken or unhappy. And this sense of like trying to develop a sense of love and belonging is missing from so many people's lives early on. And it puts you, it makes you this hungry, thirsty wanderer through the desert, and then you stumble upon a emotional buffet, basically.
Yeah.
And that's the situation that leads to, one, you seeing this person as, you know, someone like that's able to give that to you, that emotional support, but seeing it, you're unable to see clearly what he is, where someone else that maybe had those things in their youth would have said, this is weird, I'm not gonna, you know, hang out with you. But you don't recognize those things. And then then the other side of it is that this thing happens. In many cases, people fight back. But the other shitty part of this is that guys are just stronger. That just physically, in general, the male species is stronger. Like there's no denying genetics in this side. So it's it's like you can fight back. You can, like, the options are, I don't know. I've never been in this situation, but I've also never felt what it is to feel like going on a date and thinking to myself, if this girl wanted to like actually hold me down and do something to me, she could. That's never even
Right.
crossed my mind. Then
Right.
then to go through the other side of this and to actually come forward and to be judged by the 10 to 20% of people who have never had the circumstances that would even help them to understand what happened.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I'm sorry, I wanted to unpack that from kind of like the way I'm seeing this, but
Sure.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm almost angry. I am angry for you and hearing it. I know that you've already moved past this and whatnot, but I feel like this stuff still happens. And the reason that I wrote a book on relationships is because the vast majority of us has no clue what a healthy relationship looks like, from a friendship to a family member to a business to anything to a marriage. And then we all go around spouting off advice to each other as if like
Right. Yeah.
it makes no sense to me.
I know. Yeah. 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 It's so good. We teach, we help out with the premarital class at our church where like people that are engaged, they can like sign up for this class for like 5 or 6 weeks. Um, and last night, we had our like first session where the group is broken into smaller groups so they can like, and assigned to like one of us couples that they can ask questions to. And Brian and I introduced ourselves and we were like, so just so you know, like, I feel like we've got everything here for you. We've got sexual brokenness, addiction, cultural issues, like whatever you want to talk about.
Pick your
like,
flavor.
We're here. Yeah.
But you said there was a
Ryan,
turning point. I mean, I'm so curious going back to that. Like, what is the turning point for that? Because at this point, your father doesn't side with you. You're out on your own. The judges, the other girls, that had to be the most alone feeling in the world. Where do you go from there?
It was such a place of isolation, right? Which is just the thing that like darkness in this world is always trying to like create, is isolation. If we can be isolated from each other, then we're like in trouble. That's when we're in trouble. And so I walked into this, I was really stressed about chapel credits and getting enough and not being kicked out of school that way. And so I walked into this chapel and this guy had come from California, and he was a really like well-known speaker and author and host of a radio show. And he got up to speak. And in the first 5 minutes, it was just so awkward. He couldn't get anything out and he just kept shuffling with his papers. And then finally, like, all of us are starting to look at each other now. There's probably like 300 of us in there. And he finally looks at all of us and he says, I've never had this happen to me before. And so he's like, I feel really uncomfortable right now. I'm just going to be candid with all of you. But I feel like what I came here to talk about isn't why I'm here. And he just like pauses, and now we're all leaning in, right? Because we're like, anytime someone confesses vulnerability from the front, you instantly feel like a safety with them. Mm-hmm. And so he said, I just feel like that there's someone here that is barely hanging on to life. And he said, I don't know who you are or where you're even sitting, but I feel like I am literally here to tell you that if you would just hang on and get all the help that you can get for yourself, you're like, I see your future and you're impacting so many people. And he's like started like tearing up. And he's like, but I feel like the heaviness of the pain you're in. And I'm so scared you're going to give up. But if you could just hang on and get yourself help, I think like it's going to be okay. And it's going to be even better than you thought. I totally knew that he was talking to me.
Yeah.
And we had a delay there for a second.
There's a weird delay for us too.
Yeah, it was. It was like scary. So I felt like the spotlight came down on me, and I felt like everybody knew he was talking to me, but of course, like nobody did, right? And I remember like running out of that place before he was done. And the guy who had raped me was standing outside with a group of his friends, and he pointed to me, and they all started like laughing at me. And at this time, I was already was like suicidal. And I remember like running to find a phone to call my mom. And I just told her, I can't, I'm not going to make it without help. Like, I'm done. I'm done trying. I can't be strong enough. Like, I can't be trusted to be by myself anymore. I don't want to live anymore. I really feel like I should be locked up at this point. And that was hard. Like, cause it felt like, you know what I mean? Like, why am I the one who's feels like they need to be locked up and is going crazy when the actual crazy person is out there? But thank goodness my mom heard that cry for help, and she found a place I could go to in California that was like the psych ward of a hospital where they did a lot of like rehabilitation for people, and felt like I needed to get out of Washington to get away from this person. And I remember going there and standing on the outside of the double doors of that place, and it said locked psychiatric unit, and thinking to myself, I cannot believe this is my life. Like, that I am going to lock myself up when somebody else should be locked up, and just feeling so angry about it all. And then like when I went in and the doors locked behind me, I remember one of the nurses said, not only can you not get out, but honey, nobody can get in. And I started to cry, like a deep, like just place of grief that I hadn't even been able to access yet, because
Mm-hmm.
there hadn't been a safe place yet for that. So that month was like life changing for me. That I'm so thankful for that month. So,
Yeah, that's crazy. Can you can you tell me, if you are comfortable sharing it?
mhm.
What do you feel like was so? I have kind of a similar. I'm not going to say similar. I have. So my mother was not part of my childhood. I was basically given up and given to my father, who took care of me after my mother almost killed me when I was
Mm,
just a baby. Um,
wow.
so I grew up without a mom, and I remember, to share with you. I mean, you've gotten very deeply personal, and so I feel like I can say that when I was growing up, when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I'd missed that motherly attention so much that when my dad would be dating new women,
Hmm.
I would do inappropriate things with them, and most of them would shut it down. You know, every time he had a new girlfriend, maybe it was go six
Sure.
months, 12 months. Most of the time that they would shut it down, but there was two or three that would take it pretty far and allow me to do a lot of different things, and I didn't recognize until later in life when like one of my therapists was like, "That's sexual abuse," and I'm like, "No," because I went after it myself. Like I wanted the attention, and I would ask like, "Can I shower with you?" and "Can I do these things?" And like as a 10-year-old, you probably should not be allowing that, let alone letting them touch you. But some of these women would, and
Hmm.
um, and
Mm.
so it was a very weird thing. But to look back and go, man, like what an unusual thing. Because when I got to a healthy place, in I would say in my early 20s, it was very shameful to think that I'd look back and go, what was I missing? What was I looking for? Like I was kind of disgusted by my own behavior in those cases. And it was a therapist that said, well, no, as an adult, they're the ones that need to define the boundary and kind of do that. But it was still one of the things that I looked at and said, there's very real consequences to when you're missing kind of parental attention and affection as you're growing up. Very deep psychological
Yeah.
pieces. So for
Yeah.
you, what did that relationship with your father look like?
When I was little, or like
Yeah.
later on?
No, when you were little, the stuff kind of leading up
Mm.
to this want and the need for the attention from guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, gosh, like when I was a child, I couldn't do anything wrong. And I think that's very cultural. Like, I think that Koreans, are kind of known for spoiling the kids when they're little. But when I was 12 that things like really changed. And I didn't realize, like, growing up here in the States, and my mom is Caucasian. She's like Scottish and Spanish. She's not Korean, right? I didn't realize that in his mind, a Korean like traditional household is like the daughter is the one who carries her father's stress. That's one of her responsibilities.
Interesting.
And I don't know that I'm not saying that all Korean families are like that, but I've definitely talked to a lot of Korean like women that had a similar experience. And so what did that look like? That looked like anger outbursts, rage, tearing my room apart, sudden notice, like uh, be like living like very hyper vigilant because I bought into believing that I was actually responsible for my dad's happiness, that if I could just do things right, my dad would be happy. And a lot of that was because of the language he was saying to me when he would have like outbursts and rage, moments of rage. And he had grown up in the Korean War, like, not to make excuses for my dad, but his own childhood was so traumatic that it was almost like the war would come out of him into the home. And it was focused on me, mainly being the oldest and the daughter. And
Mm.
so whether it was like name calling, that you're worthless, you're a slut, you're like, I wish that you were never born, I hate the sound of your voice. It's really interesting, Pi, because I think all of us on some level have one thing that the world has been trying to take from us since we were young. And I think it's because it's our greatest like sword of bringing healing to other people. And the one thing for me that ever since I was little has been my voice. If like I can be convinced to not speak up, to not share, to not like talk with others, then I feel like my purpose, for me at least, myself, completely shuts down. And it's interesting as I look over my life, all the different things that have happened to shut my voice down, to convince me I don't have a voice. And then to find out over the years how much healing like people have shared with me that even the sound of my voice has brought. Like, it's just
Hmm.
like so like crazy. And so that was my dad's thing, was like my voice. He hated the sound of my laughter, all of those things that were just so like ridiculous, but that's where he was at. He and I have come a long way, I'll say. He actually read the book like right before it came out, and that was the beginning of he and I healing our relationship together.
Yeah.
Um, so that's almost like the best part of the story, is how all of that happened. But that's definitely like a little bit of what was going on at home before I left to go to college.
I mean, that's a lot. I feel like that hearing those words literally puts you into that place of, well, if I'm not getting love and belonging here at home, I'm going to go and I need to find it somewhere amongst friends, among the people that I'm dating, among like, you're going to crave that, and you're going to crave the praise. And I would guess those early child traumas would also make it so that, genuine praise and attention is something that you value. Like if I were to say, like, just a genuine comment, words of affirmation, essentially. Like if you were to look
Oh
back
yeah,
at,
yeah, yeah.
love
That's totally
languages,
my love language.
it would
Yeah.
naturally become the love language because it's something that's essentially denied, or even to the flip side,
Right.
I mean, you're abused with when you're younger. I'm it's very interesting when, I like hearing your perspective, and I like every different perspective, but your perspective on you having a voice, and kind of this being like the world's way of trying to shut that voice. I almost look at it from a different perspective, in that the trauma and the experiences that you went through is what developed your voice, in the sense of like,
Yeah.
I don't know that, regardless of what your voice is, I don't know that it would have nearly as much power, empathy, any of the things that it would have if it weren't for those experiences, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 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 for sure. For sure. I think it's like the the added piece to that is being aware of like what the inner battle is. because it's interesting how often I can struggle with, you know, well, maybe I shouldn't write this next book.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like I shouldn't like share about those things. Like, and it's interesting how maybe everyone goes through that on some level with writing a book, but it's like it has this twist to it that is like, oh, that's actually the evidence that's exactly what I should do. Because,
Interesting.
does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking of that imposter syndrome feeling, and yes, I don't think that there are only a few people that I've met that don't get imposter syndrome, and they're the ones that are not self-aware enough to know like what that is. And there are some very highly successful people that are just not introspective. They're just not aware to be able to dive deep and to see themselves from the outside. So it's not to say anything about who it is or their level of intelligence or what they can do. It's just some of us are not hyper introspective. Now, one of the reasons that I am that way as well is, my father, in my opinion, he's an amazing man. I mean, we left Iran. He brought me over to the States when I was 2 years old. He took his education, came over and got a degree learning English, became an engineer, got his master's degree. This is all, as I'm like two
As
growing
he's
up to the
raising
age
you.
of, yeah, like during this 10-year process, right?
Yeah.
There were plenty of nights and evenings, and when my dad would get home, I mean, he doesn't have like, it wasn't like these girlfriends stood like what am I trying to say? Stayed around, It was me and
Right.
him. And when he'd get home, like there would be nights where like I may have cooked something and I didn't cook something for him. And I'm like 8, and he would get really angry, and he would, and I get it. Like, I can't imagine being in his position doing what he did in a country that you know nothing about, raising a child by yourself. I get it. But the belt was a regular thing. On occasion, I would get picked up and thrown into a wall. Spanking was a regular thing. Getting yelled at was common. And it was, why can't you think of me? Why aren't you thinking of this? And I spent like much of my childhood like doing very interesting things. Like I'd have to clean the kitchen floor, and we had a fairly large kitchen floor. But I was like, Dad, can we get a mop or something? He's like, no, you're going to get on your hands and knees, and you're going to use a towel and some Lysol and do this. And so I think part of this is immigrant mentality. I think another part of this, like our parents, if they came from, third world countries, they've seen some crazy stuff. So what they're doing from their perspective is the minimal, discipline that is required. If you judge it based on Western standards, then you're like, that's abuse. I don't think of it that way. And I think my dad did an incredible job. But those were pieces that made me hyper aware. When he
Right.
walked in, I was tuning into every movement. What was his mood? What was his emotion? Was this going to be a good day? Was this a bad day? Do I need to be downstairs right now? Is this
Yes. Yes.
that feeling?
Yes.
And it stays with you forever. When I walk into a room, I can sense just on people's faces, the way that they speak, their countenance, who's having a bad day, who's having a good day. And
Yeah.
like you become very in tune and introspective in those ways. And this was a long story to get back to. You do it to yourself because of this voice that has developed, this ability that's developed to think critically about every possible nuanced thing. And most especially for you, given what you've been through, as you're writing a book, every one of those doubts and that voice is going to just pull every single one up and throw it right in your face.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know. I kind of see this as like you're right that it's a blessing and it's a curse. It's exactly what allows you to do what you do, to write things that actually matter, to have a voice that actually impacts people's lives. But the flip side is you didn't get it without the
Right.
pain.
Right.
So, and then you deal with the lasting repercussions of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah. It's
but
just,
this one was a very happy book. It was,
Good transition, Ty.
I don't want to. Yeah, let's transition this into. No, I honestly like. I love talking about the deep, the gritty stuff as much as anything, and there's so many. I feel like in too many conversations, we literally intend to avoid every piece of what's dark, what's, something of conflict, all this stuff. We try to avoid it. And I'm like, I don't know how that helps anyone.
No,
So,
right, for sure.
But anyway, this one was very interesting. I felt, so I'm going to be honest with you. First, I like the book. I love the concept, sitting down for 4 minutes and just like, I don't want to like, sound like I don't want to like, I don't know what that would sound like, but I have to tell you, I grew up deeply religious and spiritual. Mm-hmm. Now I'm not religious at all.
Okay.
I would say that I am kind of, I it's cliche to say that you're spiritual, but I am spiritual. I still pray. I still do those things for me, for my family, for other kids. But I have maybe a personal issue at this point in my life of like putting names and labels on things. So as I'm reading the book, I took it kind of like this 4-minute pause of introspection and meditation. That's the way that I'm seeing it and I'm interpreting it. Okay. I know that you in the book you kind of talk about pausing for 4 minutes and allowing God's voice to come into you. Maybe I'm just a weird place, Mira. Maybe you can talk to me about this, but
that is the title of the book.
You're right. 4 minutes to hear God's voice.
4 minutes of meditation.
If I was your editor.
Yeah. Well, it's different. No, I'm glad you brought that up because it's not a book on mindfulness. This is different, and meditation is different. This is a whole different thing. That's what
I want to hear.
Yeah, this is literally asking, because meditation and mindfulness definitely like have like their purpose and like the things that they serve and they do for us, and being able to like calm ourselves down like more than anything, right? Especially those of us who are like super like driven. But this is different. This is about coming to a dead end with something that you're facing, coming to crossroads with a decision you need to make. Not just like not knowing what to do about certain pain in your life, wanting to give to someone else, but instead of you praying for them and saying out loud everything you think that they need to hear that will make a difference, like what would it be like to just be quiet for 4 minutes and listen for them with the intent of asking God to share something with you that will give to them, that will bless them. It's a very intentional act of listening that is done with a like goal and the purpose to hear something that is life-giving, encouraging, confirming, healing to the path that they're already on. It's not a book about prophecy, like for sure.
Well, we're not. I understand that piece of it. I'm just curious. Don't you feel like that inner voice? This is where I want you to speak to the inner skeptic, because that's apparently me. I'm in this place now. But that voice feels like it's myself. It's the same voice that sometimes doubts. It's the same voice that sometimes encourages. It's the same voice that, questions things. What brought you to kind of accept that this is God's voice coming to you?
Yeah, because I like myself have all kinds of ideas of what I think people need or what I think maybe I need. And this is setting all that aside for 4 minutes to listen for something like outside of what I would ever think. And so one of the best things to do when you're starting this exercise is to do it with a group of close friends, because I think one of the biggest struggles we have with this kind of a practice is just a simple question of like, well, how do I know it's not my imagination? Like, how do I know it's just not something that like I'm thinking on my own and it's actually this divine insight that's coming to me, that's coming from God. And so that's why it's so great to do with a small group that you trust. And in the sense of like, all of you choose what you want to do 4 minutes on collectively. Like, let's say it's for, I don't know, it's like someone in the group, that maybe like you don't know as well. The best is when you don't know anything about the person, because then like it's not from you. But then you basically like set the timer for 4 minutes together, and you just are quiet and you listen together for that person. And what's so cool is that what happens often is that 2 or 3 of you will get the exact same thing. Like, and that is like a phenomenon that to me is outside of us being able to meditate or be mindful. That's a supernatural thing to me that is so powerful and just gives you the chills that you're like, there's no way I could have known that. For example, we're doing a 4-minute class right now, like a master class for people that really love the book. And so we have about 40 people on it. And this week during the class, we asked for a volunteer that we could all do 4 minutes together for. And I wanted them to experience this, everyone in the group, what it's like and how you physically feel when something drops into you that is outside of you. It's outside of your good intentions, and it's outside of all the healing and the tools that It's like something like supernatural that drops into your heart. And so one of the couples volunteered to be the people that we would do 4 minutes for. And none of us knew anything about them. And so I think like 5 or 6 people saw them in a cabin and just being like cozy and safe and comforted and at peace. I had, and like there was like mountains around them and snow and all these things. And so I felt so weird about my picture. I had a picture of him, like the husband holding a water diviner, and he was like in the desert, like looking for where the water source was. And I saw a picture of like him finding it and the water breaking up through under the ground. And I had the word wellspring, that he was going to find well springs. And the way the ground broke, it looked like a star. Well, Brian had a picture of a star breaking, and another gal had a picture of a star breaking with water coming up from underneath it. So when it was all done and we shared all these things with the couple, we asked him, like, does this mean anything to you? Because like to us, it doesn't mean anything, right? The wife is like in tears. She's just like beside herself. She's like, well, we actually live in a cabin. That's where we are right now in the snow, like cozy right now. And like, questioning whether or not to just have peace about where we're at. But she's like, our like life's work is that my husband goes to Africa and he looks for wells to like find water sources for villages. And like, we've literally been asking ourselves, is that something we should continue doing because it's such hard work and it takes all of this money we raise and everything that goes into it? Or is like, there's something else that we should do? So like, to hear you guys that don't even know anything about us say like, I see water breaking from under the ground. I see like you finding sources of water. So that's like different than meditation, right?
And nobody's Googling this couple beforehand. Like nobody knows who it's going to be.
No, I've done this for people like in Target.
How does that conversation go? You're just like, let's just stop here for 4 minutes.
No, I think that when you like, Brian and I have like been doing this practice for 30 years, right? And so part of me is always like listening and like wanting to hear for other people, because this is like, even though photography is our business and like, right, and we have a studio in Texas and all that, my favorite thing to do is to hear something for someone and share it with them in the moment they needed to hear it most, especially if I don't even know who they are. Because if I walk up to a woman in Target because I was down the aisle and I felt like God dropped into my heart, I want you to tell her that I have not forgotten her. I am with her. She's going to be okay. And like, and this thing and this thing and this thing. I'm terrified, Pi, when I get something like that. I'm like, oh, that's my own imagination. Like, I don't want to say that. What if she just looks at me like I'm nuts? Like, but then like my stomach, I have butterflies. I'm like sweating. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't say this, I'm going to regret it. Because how, like, I mean, really, like, is my ego that intense that I can't just like risk her saying, like, can you just leave me alone? I don't even know who you are. I've never had that happen. And I remember this one lady, I went up to her in Target and I said to her, you're going to think I am totally nuts. I am so sorry. Like, I know we don't know each other, but I was over there and I just felt like God said this to me. He dropped it into me that you need to hear this today. And she just started crying. And she was like, I just journaled about that. Like, I actually said, I need a sign today, God, that you are still with me, that you haven't forgotten about me and my family. And so it doesn't have to be like these huge revelatory things, but giving someone that, like, that word or that picture, that sense that you heard in a moment when they are desperate to hear something and there's no way you could have known it, that to me makes me excited. Do you think
I
I'm
mean,
crazy?
no, not at all. So do you think I'm crazy? I guess for my my thoughts on religion and spirituality, I'm sure I'm not here necessarily to share all my thoughts. I'm here to hear from your experiences, and I do feel like I like hearing from your experiences, and it's a very unique perspective. And the story is wild. I mean, if that's the case, that you guys were there and you could see what you saw, that is something beyond what we currently understand 100%. I also believe that we're all kind of intertwined. We are all connected. We just don't have the right tools to be able to understand those things that in the ways that we're connected yet. But one of my disconnections from religion and from the supernatural is that I've seen it almost more often than good used to control and manipulate. And I'm not just talking about like Christianity. I'm talking about, like, I grew up Muslim, and then I became Mormon later on in life. And I had some really great experiences that I will never forget those things. But I've also been, pressured from the religion in different ways to behave in certain manners, to marry when I wasn't ready, to have children, and to be made to think that, like, all of our problems and everything was stemming from me. Like, these are things that you look to a spiritual leader to inspire, to guide, to lead. And I've had many straight up tell me that all the problems in my marriages were my fault, and I am not marriages. Well, my marriage was my fault, and I believed it because it came from God. So the idea of somebody else being in this position where they can receive revelation on my behalf is something that I deeply have problems with. The idea of religion in a nutshell, I feel like each religion has so many of the same principles that as by and large are great things. And yet we use those teachings to say that the other person's wrong, to say that, if you're not a part of this, you're going to hell, and even to start wars.
Yeah.
So that's like my disconnect.
Yeah, that's your context. Yes. Honestly, like, we would all just do so good to, like, take a note from the Jewish people. I mean, like, Jewish people are amazing to me. We spent
You got to tell me why this is.
We spent a month in Israel when we were filming our family travel show for Disney. And one of the most amazing things that I got from that culture and Jewish religion is their appreciation for disagreement, their appreciation for loving each other, being committed to each other, regardless of what everybody else thinks around them. And the church in Western church is not, like, we've not done a good job of figuring that out. And it leads to a lot of, like, the destructiveness that you shared, and control, and, like, taking God and using it as a manipulation tool. And I get it. Like, from way back when I was in college, this guy's studying to be a youth pastor, right? This is the last person that should ever be in like a pastoral position.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting,
That
like one
is
night
wild to me.
yeah, and it brought up my own issues with being able to trust God. I mean, that's really like where this 4 minutes started for me, is when I was that age and I couldn't even picture God as a man, as a father, as like a form of Jesus. Like all I knew about men is that they hurt me and they victimized me, and I couldn't even go there. And one of the first times I ever did this 4 minutes, we didn't call it 4 minutes back then, but it was just like being quiet and listening, was when I had that experience where God dropped something so powerful into my heart that like I was hooked from then on. Like I couldn't believe that like God was okay that I couldn't see him as any of those things, him, her, whatever you want to reference it, right? Um but they also had an answer for me. There was like more, he was more mysterious and beyond anything I could understand. And so with Jewish people, when we were there in Israel, we got to experience Shabbat with a family on the West Bank, and the whole community came. And there was like 30 or 40 of them in this house. And in the middle of us all having dinner together, and this is a very like intellectual community. We have like professors there that teach, you know, rabbinical law. We have like politicians there. Some of them are from the US that immigrated back to Israel. It's a smart group of people, right? And so my daughter, in the middle of this like dinner, asked this question, and she's like, she was a tween at the time, and she was like, I was just wondering what Jewish people think about heaven and hell, because in Christianity it seems like that's a huge focus. Is there a hell for Jews? Like, I'm just curious. And the rabbi looked at her and smiled, and he's like, I love that question, Pascaline. And he looked around at the whole room and he was like, who would like to go first? And for the next 2 hours, it was the most colorful, dynamic, profound, heated, incredibly inspiring debate. Everyone had a different perspective. And finally, after 2 hours, he kind of brought it to an end, and he looked at Pascaline and he said, I hope that what we've given you is, I know we didn't necessarily give you an answer, but that we've shown you that it's okay to have different thoughts and feelings about things and still be a tight community and still be there for each other. And I was like, oh my gosh, if we could understand that in Western Christianity, this whole like
I've never seen that period. I mean, even if you look at, see, I don't know. I've never been to Israel. I've met some I try not to generalize in anything that I talk about, but I did have a chance to meet some very sweet young people from Israel about 2 months ago. I was out shooting like strangers. I was actually doing like a photo shoot for strangers, just like walking around, and with my friend David Suh. And so this group of and we're asking people like one by one, would you like to get a picture and things like that. This group of like 8 Jewish kids comes up and like, we'll do ours. And I was like, okay. Like we just set up like a line of like, doing portraits, like just, anyway, they were very sweet, very kind, and very intellectually minded. I don't know that I've seen that even in our own Jewish communities. And that being said, I don't know that I've seen that many of them. I only know of kind of like the Jewish Orthodox community, where here in the States, there's strong Orthodox communities in New York and here on the West Coast. And they're pretty hardcore. Like if you don't agree with the teachings, you are out, like if you stray, they speak about you as having strayed away from, all of it. And it's very similar to Mormonism. Like technically right now I'm still baptized Christian. I'm still Mormon. But they refer to me as like a inactive member, or that I have, there's specific terms that are kind of used to describe people that are no longer with us, essentially, or I've gone apostate,
Sure.
And it's really hard to kind of wrap the head around that sense of community when you feel like there's a sense of judgment based on what you believe or the decisions that you make. Early on, I'll give you an example of this. You know, I was in a position of leadership for quite a period of time, and you're asked to do this. It's a volunteer type thing that you're doing. And
Okay.
so I'm not seeking it. I was asked to do the things that I was doing. So I'm volunteering my time to do those things. And here in my business, you know, you have, what was it, Proposition 8 at the time, that was the law on gay marriage, right? And to me, it was like, this was equivalent to me to any other form of segregation or, you know, discrimination or anything else. And I'm a wedding photographer. And personally, I feel like if I can document a couple's love, I really don't care. I care if their love is genuine. If their love is genuine, I want to photograph it. I don't care who they are. I don't care their gender identities. I don't care about any of those things. So I started shooting, you know, along with all of my clients. I got LGBTQ plus clients that would come through. And I got cornered for it at church, where like one of the other members literally stopped me and said, "I can't believe that you would do that." And I was like, "I'm sorry, sister, I don't really know what you're talking about." She's like, "I can't believe you would photograph and try to make something so disgusting look beautiful." And I know that this is not, you know, I don't want anybody to think that all Mormons think this way. That's not the case at all. Like, from internally, what the church was teaching at the time was to love everybody, but, you know, stand up for what you believe in. Okay, like, you know, that's the official kind of stance on it at the time. But the
Mm-hmm.
culture was not that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah,
the
yeah.
teachings, but then there's the culture, and they often have nothing in common with each other. And so
Right.
I resonated with a lot of the teachings with every religion, but I don't resonate with the culture that's brought along with it. And I stood there defending myself to this sister, and I said, like, I was like, "Do you have anyone that's gay in your family?" And she's like, "No. And if I did, I would send them to therapy." And I was like, "So do you know that, like, it's been long proven that you're born that way, that most people do not choose this as a path, but they, like, why would you choose that as a path in life? Like, let me just ask you a simple question." It turned into this long debate, and we don't need to go into it. But I just remember the sense of like, it's not okay to do anything that deviates from the standard. And
Right. Sure.
I got that sense from every religion I participated in, from Islam to, you know, Christianity to Catholic, you know, Christianity to Mormon Christianity to like all the different variants. That was like what I took from it. And when I
Yeah.
left it all, I felt like I had a better relationship with God than when I was within it.
Mm. And yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I mean, it's just the reality is like all the broken people we were talking about in the beginning are in the church. Like, right.
Hurt people, right?
Right. Yes. And that's really one of the reasons I was like so excited. Oh, there's a delay. Um,
You got another
should
one
I
of those
wait for a
crazy
second?
faces. There you go.
I know
I
the
love
delays are
your
crazy
delays
fun.
are perfectly timed, where it's like we know it's going to last 5 seconds and we can still talk through it. So we need to do it. So next time we have a delay, let's just do
Okay.
sound effects.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
going to do sound effects to your delay. Okay.
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay.
Um, One of the reasons, though, I really like loved writing this book is because it was a way to say goodbye to a chapter in our family's life in some ways, because we homeschooled our kids. They traveled all over the world with us. And even though we were filming family travel show for Disney or doing photography, really the heart of our family was always like looking for opportunities to encourage other people. And the 4 minutes is like something that supersedes any religion or cultural barrier. Like one of our favorite stories was the 4 minutes we did for our Egyptologist in Egypt who was Muslim. And it wasn't
Yeah.
about converting him, and it wasn't about like um trying to get him to think like we did. It was just wanting to give something to him because of how much he had given to us.
That's what it should
And
be. That's exactly what
yes.
all of it should be. Every religion.
And so when you said earlier that you feel very like very hesitant to receive something from someone who is saying that they're getting this like inspirational like insight or like word or picture that they want to give you. I think that we should all be that way on some level though, because I think that whatever we are listening for other people, it should be within parameters that is encouraging, life-giving, and already confirming what they're already like asking God about themselves. Mm-hmm. And if it's out of those parameters, then maybe we're just meant to pray for them on our own, or like it's really none of our business. Do you know what I'm saying? And so so the book talks about like those parameters, because we don't need any more like hurt perpetuated in society than it already is.
And I think you touched on that early in the book too, saying like, this 4 minutes isn't so that you can stand up and go tell other people how to live their lives type thing and say that this came from God. One of the things that I really loved about the book is there's many things that I really enjoyed. I hope it doesn't sound like I didn't enjoy the book. I really enjoyed the book. Did I not start with that? Did I not start with I like the book a lot. I really enjoyed I think the thing that I took the most.
The classic husband who was like, I really like what you're trying to say, but blah 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 blah. And I'm like, wait, what?
Are we like an hour into this before discovering that I actually like the book? I feel like I need to go back and like write.
Nobody's listening anymore. Nobody's listening.
Of course they're still here listening.
Holy crap, I don't want to read that book. Thank you, Pi, for helping us dodge a bullet there.
Mike, edit note. When Pi references the book early on, say Pi actually loves the book. He'll get to this. Put in the in the text right there. No, I really enjoyed the experiences that you shared. And I also love the fact that this is something that you do with your family. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because you've kind of glanced over it a little bit in terms of like what you've done, but your accomplishments are kind of crazy. You have 6 books that are out, but you also were filming a television show for Disney, correct? For quite a few years. Can you walk us through that experience? Because you're like, I was filming for Disney, and then blah, and then like keep going, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. So what part of it do you want me to expand on?
All of it. How did you get started working with Disney?
Okay, that's a great story. And it kind of has to do with the 4 minutes. In fact, there's a chapter in the book called How We Met Disney.
Okay, I have not gotten there yet. Did you stop someone at Target, do your 4 minutes, and they're like, I just happen to be the CEO of Disney?
No. What happened was I was invited to speak at a women's conference. It was a mom blogging conference that was happening in Tennessee. And it was a great opportunity, but WPPI, the wedding portrait conference, right, was right before it. And so I was going to be like basically at WPPI speaking every day for Sony, because
you're also a Sony ambassador. Yeah, let's just glance over that too. Like, let's just gloss over all of this.
So I knew that in my like speaking schedule for Sony, I was just going to be empty, right? And flying to Tennessee. And I really like when I speak somewhere, I just want to be able to give them everything. And so I said no, because I felt like I wasn't going to be able to give them that. But maybe the next year or the future. So this gal like emailed me back again and said, are you sure? And, and I politely and graciously declined again. And then she emailed me back a third and a fourth time. Finally, like the fourth time, she said, okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know like where you're at with faith, religion, whatever it is, but I this is not a faith-based conference. This is for mom bloggers. But I myself have been praying for this conference and who should be here. And every time I pray about this, I see you meeting someone strategic in your future. And she's like, I feel so scared saying that to you because you're going to think I'm manipulating you to get you to come here, right? Like you were saying, right? Like someone using like God's name to like control something. But I just knew that that wasn't her heart.
But that's like in a good way.
Yeah, like that was like really cool. And so I was like, gosh, you know what? I was like, good for you for like stepping out. I know exactly how that feels, how scary that is to say to someone. And so I said, I'll be there. I'm going to find a way to be there. So, and it was insane getting there. It was literally like they had my name printed wrong on the ticket. Like my flight was like everything that you can imagine. It was like hell getting there. And I'm like, wow, like usually when everything's falling apart, something great's about to happen. That's like my life philosophy. So, one of them at least. So anyways, I get there, I do the speaking engagement and I try my best to be as accessible as possible. Brian and I both were meeting tons of people, but no one really like stands out. And so after that first day, after I was done, the next day I looked at Brian, there was like another day left of their conference. I was like, I'm so exhausted. Like, I just want to go home and be with the kids. Like, why don't we just leave early? And so we go to the airport in the middle of the day and I've just kind of let go of like whoever I'm supposed to meet there. And there's nobody at the airport except for Brian and I and these two women behind us going through security. And so basically like Brian starts flirting with me. Like he doesn't know me and he wants to like have drinks on the other side at the bar and he thinks I'm really cute. And I'm just so annoyed because I'm like, can we just go through security? Will you just shut up? Like go through security. But like he doesn't.
He's trying to be sweet and funny. And you're like, just stop it.
Just push your bag through security, put it on the belt and let's go. And so, so we go through like the security thing and on the other side, Brian literally grabs me. He double dips me and gives me this like theatrical kiss in front of these two women. And I'm really frustrated. And like one of these women looks at us, she drops her bag and she's like, oh my gosh, you guys are married. I totally thought he was trying to like pick you up or hit on you or whatever. And so Brian and I always like flew separate throughout our whole kids growing up. We never flew on the same plane in case like anything
okay,
happened.
in case something happens.
Yeah, because if you don't want the president, right, to go down, like we all know who like the president is.
The president of the home. Okay.
So put the vice president on a different plane.
I wasn't understanding your line of reasoning, but then you brought the presidency into it, and I was like, okay, now I can understand.
Now you're following me. So anyway, so Brian's flight was like boarding, so he had to take off, and he took off running. And this lady looks at me and she's like, gosh, she's like, I'm so depressed about my marriage. Like, you guys are so fun. And I'm just so depressed about my own marriage. And I was like, oh no. And so I said, well, why don't we go have coffee together? I've got an hour before my flight takes off. So we went and had coffee and we talked about everything, their finances, their communication, their sex life, their parenting, like everything. And then my plane started calling out to board. And so I started packing up my stuff and I was like, I'm so glad like we got to meet and have this time together and just, encouraging each other and me sharing different things that like Brian and I had been through. And I looked at her and I was like, I never even asked you like what you're doing here in Tennessee. And she looks at me and she goes, I'm actually not even supposed to be here right now. I was booked on the wrong flight on the wrong day. She said, I'm from Disney. I'm here undercover at the conference that you spoke at. And my assignment was to find a mom that we could build a brand around. And I think I just found her.
You're joking.
No. That's how we met.
And with that, you guys all need to do your 4 minutes.
And so So 3 months later, we were flown to Burbank, California, where their headquarters are. And we walked into this big conference room with a bunch of their executives, and they all yelled at Brian and I, "Show us the kiss from the airport."
Show us the kiss from the airport. You're kidding.
No.
Brian has to take complete credit for this. Does Brian take complete credit for this?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Brian takes credit for too much. So period. So that's how we met Disney. So then we filmed a show with them about it was about me going around the country, teaching moms and their kids how to take photos of things that they love. And that ran, like, we like filmed a season and they reran it for like almost 10 years. And I have like 3 and 4-year-olds that would come up to me at airports, at Costco, at parks, and all show me the photos that they're taking from watching that show. It's really sweet. And then they wanted to do another show together, and that's when we did Adventure Family, the family travel show. So
that's when you guys were traveling all around filming. I'm sorry to I want to ask what that experience was like, but it was a series of experiences. So what did that production like when you're doing this travel show with the family? Like you're flying every day. Like what are you doing? I'm sorry, I'm so pedestrian. My understanding of this.
No. It was so funny. I was just laughing because I was remembering, like, at one point we were in a hotel off in Egypt somewhere off the Red Sea, and Pascaline was throwing up, our daughter, for the 50 millionth time, because every time we entered a new country, she went through 3 days of throwing up. Blaze is bored and hungry, and I'm crying because nothing's going the way I thought. And Brian collapses on the bed and he goes, "Now I know why there's not a family travel show, because nobody's stupid enough to do this." He's like, "This is the stupidest idea we've ever tried."
There had to have been that. It does sound stressful. I'm going to be honest. Having the kids on the road nonstop with no place to rest, and then having film crews that are catching. Are they filming everything?
So this is what happens. So our family does the 4 minutes together every New Year, but also throughout the year. And this is so great to. Okay, if anyone is still listening at this point,
of course they're still listening.
If there's nothing else you get from this interview, this time we've had together, it's to teach your kids how to hear God's voice. Because when your kids believe that there's something bigger out there that is behind them and for them and not against them, it will change the course of their future. They will always have some way to tap into a peace beyond their understanding. And that's what our main mission as parents was with our kids. If that's they're still going to go through struggles. They're still going to go through pain and difficult times, but will they know how to find their way back to that peace? Right. So we taught our kids early on how to set the timer, and
you got to do a sound effect delay. Right now. You got to do a sound effect. Of course, it happens at the most kind of poignant part of the message here. I love what you're saying, because you're right. They are going to struggle, and if there's something that they can kind of lean back towards, then 100%.
So when the kids were little, we would, instead of 4 minutes, we did 30 seconds. And because listening is a practice, right? Yeah. It takes practice,
for sure.
Especially in today's world and stuff. So, and we all had our own little notebooks, because my daughter was like, "Well, how do I know that this is God and not my imagination?" Which is a great question. And I said, "Well, I'm going to ask God to give me the exact same thing he gives you. And then we'll know that there's no way we both could have known." And God did do that several times to build up this sense of awareness in her of when this is just my own good thoughts and when like something feels different. So in one of our 4 minutes as a family, we all got the word go. It was the first time all four of us got the same thing.
Crazy.
And one of us had a picture of us looking at Egypt. Another person had a picture of us pointing to the Middle East. One of us saw us riding camels. And we were like, oh my gosh, we're going to like the Middle East. Like, this is totally going to happen. And that was the first year we didn't travel anywhere at all. Like, we were totally like grounded. And so, but as we kept doing the 4 minutes together as a family, we kept like thinking about, like, we kept having these same pictures and stuff come up. To one point, I just finally told one night the kids, I'm like, what if I just emailed Egypt? Like, I don't know, like maybe like I should just email them and tell them that
Email
like
Egypt. Like as
yeah,
if there's one email, a dedicated email that goes just to Egypt.
exactly.
Okay, got it.
Exactly. And the kids were like, yeah, Mom, email Egypt. Like, that's, why haven't we done that? And so I came up with every email address I could think of, like info@egypt.com, hotels@egypt.com. I came up with like 40 different emails. Some of them I found, some of them I just made up. And I was like, I don't know where this is going to go. And so I sent this email off to Egypt and I said who we are. And they were in the midst of the revolution. And so they had just, that revolution had just ended. This is like 2012 or something. And so I told him, I said, I really feel like, having traveled a lot internationally, the US news is not representing the full story. And if you are open to it, we can film, we can photograph, we can come as a family and like tell a different side of the story. So this was the beginning of like this family travel idea.
Yeah.
Well, the next morning, one email came back. And
This is insane to me.
And they were like, we would love that. And not only that, but we'll pay for your family to come and we'll take you through Egypt for a month to tell the best story possible.
What? Okay, I didn't
Yeah.
think you were crazy before when you were talking about all the God stuff, but now I think you're crazy. But in the best way possible. Like, no one would ever think to do that.
I know, right? It just
this is during,
what if I emailed Egypt?
Yeah, this is during filming the show, right? So you're filming with Disney, and so you basically take the show to Egypt?
No, this hasn't started. So the show hasn't been approved yet. So we go to film like pilot content of like what this show can look like. And the VP that we work with at Disney, she's like, great, like, let's try it. Let's do it. Bring everything back that you get. And like, let's see if we can't like pitch this and like get a show in the works. And so we did that, and you can read the 4-minute book. There's so many stories with that. And then we came back and we felt like we're supposed to do a show. Like, we're supposed to do this. And we did our 4 minutes again and again and again. Part of doing 4 minutes for us is feeling like courage to take some insane leaps of faith. And so Disney was like dragging their feet to like partner with this other network, which I'm not going to name. And they couldn't agree on anything, but they knew that they wanted us to go to New Zealand. That's where they wanted the show to start filming at, because there was no language barrier. So they thought, let's set them up for success and not have a foreign language issue to deal with.
Yeah.
So it was getting later and later in the year. Like New Zealand was going to start getting real cold because they're the opposite of here. So we do our 4 minutes several times and we decide, you know what? Sometimes you have to like step out in faith for other people to just like get on board. So we did something insane. We actually put our home on the market and everything in storage. And we left for New Zealand with one-way tickets.
Wow.
We like and no contract. So the whole time, like, we're filming, Disney's constantly updating us saying that like the contract's gonna, like, we're doing great. The contract's gonna happen any day now. The funding's gonna come through. And then the next day would be like, this contract's never gonna happen. Like, you should come home. And it was like up and down and up and down. And so how do you like stay present when you have that much stress around you?
Yeah,
and you like incredible. You've left everything. And it was the 4 minutes. we did the 4 minutes like every day, sometimes several times a day, to like ground us in our purpose there. So then we only had enough money to either like come home or keep going. And we did our 4 minutes and we just felt like we weren't supposed to stop. So we went to Thailand, and we'd been to Thailand several times with the kids over the years. And we got to this remote area that we'd gone to a bunch. And this lady walked up to us on the beach and she's like, I have a place for you guys to live as long as you need it. Like, I found it for you. I'm so excited about what you're doing. Because the whole mission of the show was to help families unplug and take an adventure together and do something not as extreme as we were doing, but to like do something and fun out of the ordinary together. So then we got stuck in Thailand, and Disney was constantly like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And no, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And we ran out of money. We literally were stuck in the jungle. And I remember like the monsoon rains had started, and I told the kids, I was like, man, like, there's one of two things going on here. Either like we are completely at a dead end, or God just hasn't shown us like what the next step is. And the kids were like, God just hasn't told us, Mom. God always tells us. It's just not time yet. So we had $250 in our bank account. We'd spent everything. We'd given up everything to film this. And we're not like 20-something backpackers. Like, we have kids. Like, we have a responsibility, right? And so then all of a sudden I get an email from our friends in Dallas who are like, you know, this is going to probably sound really weird, but we are friends. This is a pastors of the church in Dallas. And they're like, we're really close with the Jewish community here. And there's a billionaire philanthropist that we are friends with who is looking for a film crew to come and film in Israel everything that he's doing there. And as like pay, he'll pay for you to stay as long as you need to film Israel. Do you have time to do that?
That's crazy.
And we were like, all we have is time. We're like stuck in a jungle. So we flew to Israel. They flew us to Israel, and we were there for a month. And then we didn't have enough money to get back to the States, but we had enough money to get to Europe. And our friends were in Italy at the time.
This is
so
wild.
So they were like, come to Italy. And we were like, we've always wanted to. Okay. So we went to Italy, and I remember showing up at their door just being exhausted, spiritually, emotionally, physically. We still did not have a contract. We still had no idea if any of this was like going to make a difference for anybody. But Brian and I also knew that we wanted to teach our kids how to build a dream, and we wanted them to know firsthand that this is what it looks like sometimes. Sometimes you like are so sure of what you're doing, and other times you feel like you completely took a left turn.
Yeah.
And when you're that scared and terrified, what do? And for us, it's the 4 minutes, like, to just listen. Did we miss something? Do we take another step forward? And so in Italy, she helped me put out to her friends that I was there and available to do family photo shoots. And so I did a handful of family photo shoots for these families there in Italy, and it made us enough money to fly ourselves home 2 weeks later. We came home to an empty house, and we were literally sitting on our living room floor that first morning when an email came into our inbox from Disney with a contract.
Wow. What had you guys done with all the footage at that time? Were you guys still editing, or were you just racking up the footage, like just waiting for the show to be greenlit?
Yeah, we were racking up the footage. We were just like, we were like storyboarding everything. And then what's so great is that church in Texas that like offered to like connect us to the Jewish friend. They had an amazing editing team. And so they were like, well, we could help with the project. They had offered that before Disney came on with a contract, to use some of their editing team to help us start putting like the show together. And so, so the show became this, like interstitial series, like these 3-minute short form, to 7-minute episodes. Right.
Yeah.
And, the network that was on board to distribute it decided that like they didn't want to do that after all of this work. And so then we hit the ground pitching it. And then I had CW Network on board, but they were like, we need to find advertising to fund this. So I pitched that show over 100 times.
That's
Everyone, like
wild.
in person in New York, to the CMO of Walmart and Johnson and Johnson and Coca-Cola. I literally pitched that show to like the giants. And it's so insane that like people loved it. And like so many times we were right there. Like we took our friends out to dinner 3 different times thinking our contract was done and the show was going to air. And the third time our friends were like, we can't let you buy anymore.
Yeah.
Like, until we actually see it on TV. Like we feel like you can't pay anymore. And it never hit like anything besides a web platform. And so that's one of those things in life where I've just gone, what was that all about on some level? And at the same time, like our family learned so much through that we'll never forget. And so writing 4 minutes to hear God's voice, our daughter now has gone to college. And it's like totally gonna make me cry, even though she's been like gone for a year
Oh,
now. But you can see like our family was so close, and like
yeah.
we moved and operated as a unit. And it was like this book to write to just like cherish and celebrate the adventures that we took with our kids and the faith space that we chose to step into again and again. And the belief that like God is for us. And and the people we met along the way, the 4 minutes that we did for people along the way, maybe it was like for them, maybe it was for the backpacker in the bar in Thailand. And the 4 minutes we did in that bar, and Blaze was like 7 at the time, and Blaze had a picture of him like holding a girl's hand and then letting go of it and walking away from her. And then
Oh,
all of a sudden he was holding someone else's hand, and it was Jesus's hand. And he just said that then all of a sudden Jesus's hand took his hand and put it in another woman's hand. And this backpacker just starts bawling. And he's like, who's your kid? Like, your kid is insane. We've never met this backpacker. And he's like, I'm literally here because I just broke off my engagement. And I've just been wandering the world because I feel so lost right now. And I just like, don't even know if God even cares. And so like, for moments like that, is that what we did all of that for? Like, I don't know, but I'm so glad we did it.
the
Right.
experiences and the memories have to be incredible. I mean, that's a lifetime of experiences that you guys were able to put together in a very short span. Like nobody spends that much time with their families over the course of how long was that? A year or two?
That was like the travel, like the actual intense travel was like
Yeah.
4.5, like 5 months.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say
Yeah.
like most families probably don't travel and spend that much time with their children probably in
No.
years, like a decade. That's like a decade worth of time. So that's one of those things where, as you know, Justin, my business partner, and Chris, we all have kids now, and we're very aware of like finding every opportunity to create experiences with the family. That
Yeah.
that like it's okay if it kind of, if we can pick up and move to Hawaii for a month and create content out there and give the kids an experience.
Yeah.
Those things are so incredibly valuable because that time is so fleeting and you only have so much time to instill all these things, and you did that. So
Yeah.
that has to be 100% worthwhile. But the contracts that you said that came through, even if it's internet based, those are still like funded contracts. You're still working for
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah. We got paid, and everything that like we put into it, we more than got out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it
And
just
then
didn't end up like on CW or, Saturday mornings.
yeah, it didn't. The expectation was probably a little bit higher than, but the experience, man, I can't think of anything that could rival that. Now, when I met you guys in Alaska, actually, that's
Yeah.
when you were. At that point, had you had a studio yet? Because remember we talked about you guys were
No.
saying you were going to open a studio.
Yeah, yeah. So we literally, at that time when we met, Brian and I were doing our 4 minutes all the time about, do we keep building this family travel brand, or
Yeah.
do we like just plant some roots and do a portrait studio, like return to our roots, really
Yeah.
family photography like 20 years ago, right? Um, and a portrait studio just seems so like boring compared to the life that we had just lived, right? But at the same time, our kids, it was time for our kids to start their own adventures. Our daughter was headed to college. Blaze was like, I want to try going to high school. I've been homeschooled, like, but the only other person I am in class with is gone now. She's like gone to college, right? And so, and honestly, we were tired, like
Yeah.
that 4 to 6 months of like, I mean, we were nomadic still for another couple of months after that. Like that was exhausting. And so so thank God we did not decide to put everything into a travel brand when COVID happened, like
Oh man.
a year later.
Not good. I have a lot of travel photography friends that are just kind of like, well, let's figure out something else to do for a while.
I know, right?
It's brutal.
Yeah.
But you guys actually got your studio too, right? Because I remember we talked about like you have a physical studio space at this point.
No, right now we're looking at spaces right now to buy in the area. You and I had talked, and you gave me such great advice. You were like,
I don't remember what that
if you can, well, I do, because it was so good. You were like, if you can do it out of your home, and because we were new to the area, right? Like we're from Seattle, and so you were like, if you can do it out of your home and get a sense for like what you want this model to look like and build that local clientele base. And so it's 2 years later, and we're so excited. We're like looking at like space as we speak.
A building
it's
to
really
purchase.
Exciting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome.
And it feels good, and we love it. It's not boring. I actually really love it.
Well, I would imagine it's probably everything that you love at this point, which is getting to know people, finding what they value, and being able to shoot and document that value and then show it to them. So it's probably right along in there in line with your core values, along with, like you said, like you're writing your books. You also have your in-person, you said you're doing like couples workshops, like in-person workshops as well.
Oh no, that was like, well, we've done our confidence workshop for like 15 years for women that
but you said
like
you had
want confidence.
A 4-minute workshop.
We're doing that online.
Okay.
We do like a premarital class at our church for like we help out with that. But really like our main focus is this, those are kind of more like, I don't know what you call them. Things that we love
Side
to help
hustles.
With. No, I just wanted to help set people up for success. When you're engaged, like it's such a great time to like have people in your life who've been married a long time, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's more like that.
Well, I wanted to ask you, we're saving this part for very last, so there's nobody even listening to this at this point. But so
we can finally have an honest conversation. Let's just
Did you
talk.
get a chance to read my book? We'll save the crappiest of the books for the very last. Did you get a chance to read mine? And it's okay if you just tear in it. If you want to go straight, you don't even have to like say anything nice. Just go right into it.
I should start with saying I really liked it, and then just like blah 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 blah.
But
I've read the first 100 pages of it.
Okay, good job.
And I have a ton of feedback for you.
Oh, shiz.
But I want to do it offline, just in case one person is listening.
Shite. You heard it here, folks.
No, I have like a ton of feedback, and I think that that'll be a great conversation, but I don't want to do it in this format.
You don't want to... Then it's not going to be great. What do you mean? If it were going to be great. That was definitely much worse than mine when I said, I really liked it. Here's where I kind of stand
No.
on my life. Help me understand. You just said
this book isn't published yet, so there's
this is
still
true.
like this book isn't
There's
published.
still time to make it good.
It's not official. I have some really like straightforward questions for you about the book, because having published 6 books, right, and working with all different kinds of editors and agents and different, it's like there's certain things that like get grounded into you, and I just want to like, it's a whole different conversation. So I'm excited about it, Pi. It's gonna be great.
When do I get to have my butt handed to me?
Look at how great, like, I'm not pixely at all now. Look at this. It's just like, it's almost like the internet leaned in and they're like, okay, I want to hear this.
The internet leaned into Mira tearing apart Pi's book. For sure.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I have greatly appreciated the time that we've had. Surprisingly, once we got things going, it actually went pretty dang well.
Good transition.
One of my favorite things at the beginning of this conversation was when Brian was on the computer and I was like texting you. Brian was trying to fix your computer and I'm texting you in the background. And I'm like, say, Brian, how are you? And then you just stayed quiet. And I was like, why is she saying anything? And I'm like, he needs to focus. I'm like, oh, got it. That makes sense.
Yeah, I've learned that lesson a handful of times. You don't ask Brian to help you with something technical and then try to be social at the same time. Yeah, that's it.
Two completely separate
I'm
parts.
not a dummy, Pi.
So he still doesn't know that I asked how he was doing or anything.
No,
you can let him know after the call.
I'll tell him. Yeah, I'll tell him. I'll let him know.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, Mira. Where can everybody follow your photography? So why don't you?
Yeah.
We're going to link it up too, but why don't you tell them?
Okay, rakoh.com, just my name. And the book, The 4 Minutes, has its own website, the4minutes.com. And I think that's, on Instagram, all the social media, Facebook, it's just my name, Ra Koh.
Awesome, Mira. Appreciate you having you on.
Thanks, bye.
We'll talk/laugh again soon.
Yes. You and I are going to have an offline chat.
Okay. All right. See you guys.
Okay.